Courtney, that was bloody fantastic.
There's a particular kind of silence that happens on live television, the kind producers dread, because dead air is supposed to be a disaster. But every so often, silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. That's what happened in 2018, on the America's Got Talent stage, when a 13-year-old girl from a small mining village in the north of England opened her mouth, and something ancient came out. Her name was Courtney Hadwin, and for about 90 seconds, she made 4 judges, a packed studio audience, and eventually millions of people online forget how to breathe. This is the story of what came after that moment. The deal, the pressure, the disappearance, and the years it took her to find her way back to herself. And somewhere in that story is a claim that has been floating around the internet for a while now. That's Simon Cowell, the man who built an empire on being unshakable, finally admitted, on camera, in a rare unguarded moment, that the industry got it wrong with Courtney. We'll get to that claim, and we'll be honest with you about how solid it actually is. But first, let's understand why so many people wanted it to be true. Courtney Hadwin was born in July 2004 and grew up in Heselden, a former colliery village in County Durham, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody and nothing about your daily life suggests you're destined for a stage in Los Angeles. She was raised alongside 2 younger siblings, in a household that didn't have industry connections or stage parent ambitions, just a kid who liked to sing. She started small, the way most singers do, humming around the house, performing in school assemblies, trying out community theater. What tipped her from kid who likes singing into kid who might actually be extraordinary was a viral moment nobody planned. During a lunchtime open mic at her school, she performed a cover that stunned her classmates. Someone filmed it on a phone. It landed on Facebook, and within days half the town was talking about the girl with the impossible voice. From there, it snowballed in a very ordinary, unglamorous way, the way most real talent stories actually happen, without a magic wand. She started busking to help pay for proper vocal lessons. She entered regional competitions. She lost some, placed in others, and slowly built a reputation across the northeast of England as someone worth watching. By her early teens, she'd opened for a major touring act in front of a crowd of thousands, and she'd made it deep into competitions like The Voice Kids UK, singing songs by artists 2 or 3 generations older than her, with a rasp and a growl that made no sense coming out of someone that young. Her family, meanwhile, was quietly making sacrifices most people never hear about. Her dad picked up extra work to cover the cost of lessons and travel. Her mom ferried her to auditions. None of it was glamorous. All of it mattered. By early 2018, a casting call came in for America's Got Talent. Not Britain's Got Talent, the American show, looking for international talent that could surprise a U.S. audience. Courtney took the audition. Nobody in Heselden could have predicted what happened next. She walked out looking exactly like what she was, a shy schoolgirl, a little stiff, clearly nervous, barely making eye contact with the judges. It's a detail people love to point out now, because it makes what happened next feel almost like a magic trick. The band kicked in. She opened her mouth, and the shy schoolgirl vanished. What came out was raw, throaty, full-throttle rock and soul, somewhere between Janis Joplin and a force of nature, delivered by someone who, biologically, should not have had the lung capacity or life experience to sing like that. She didn't just hit the notes. She attacked them, thrashing around the stage with an energy that looked less like a performance and more like something taking possession of her. The judges' faces told the whole story. One judge hit the golden buzzer almost on reflex, sending her straight to the live shows. Simon Cowell, a man whose entire public persona is built on looking bored by things other people find impressive, sat there visibly stunned, and when he finally spoke, he told her that she'd walked out shy and walked off like a completely different creature entirely. The clip did what viral clips do. It spread across every platform, translated into a dozen languages, dissected by vocal coaches, reacted to by strangers on every continent. Within weeks, the view count on that single audition had climbed into the hundreds of millions. She wasn't just a contestant anymore. She was a phenomenon, discussed on morning shows and covered by outlets that had never mentioned a reality TV contestant before. She kept advancing through the competition, quarterfinals, semifinals, delivering performances that critics kept describing as impossible for someone her age. When the season finale arrived, she didn't win. She placed sixth. But by then, the placement almost didn't matter. She'd already won something bigger, a level of global attention that most adult artists spend a decade chasing. And with that attention came the machine. Here's the part of the story that gets skipped in most of the highlight reels. Virality is not a career. It's an opportunity. And what happens with that opportunity depends entirely on who's standing around you when the cameras go off. Within months of her audition, Courtney signed with Simon Cowell's label in partnership with a major record company. She was 14 years old. In the interviews around the announcement, she sounded thrilled, and by every account, she genuinely was. This was the dream. This was the thing she'd been busking and taking extra lessons for since she was 11. What nobody hands a 14-year-old, along with the contract, is a manual for what comes next. Almost immediately, she was pulled into a world built for adults. Songwriting sessions with professional teams. Producers pitching a sound, an image, a marketable persona. Comparisons to Janis Joplin, which sounded like compliments, but functioned more like a mold she was expected to pour herself into. She was still a kid figuring out who she was as a person, and she was simultaneously expected to already know who she was as a brand. She's spoken since then about how disorienting that period felt, about walking into rooms full of adults who all had strong opinions about what she should sound like, what she should sing about, how she should present herself, and how hard it was to hold onto her own instincts in the middle of all of that. It's a common story among young performers, pushed into major label machinery fast, but it doesn't become less painful for being common. Meanwhile, the schedule itself was brutal. Transatlantic travel, studio sessions bouncing between the UK and the US, promotional obligations stacked on top of the ordinary, exhausting work of being a teenager, school, friendships, just growing up. Except now with cameras occasionally pointed at her, and an audience of hundreds of millions who'd seen that first audition and expected lightning to strike on command every time. She kept working. She kept showing up. And slowly, the toll of it started to show. Not in public breakdowns or headline scandals, but in something quieter. A kid who used to describe singing as pure joy starting to describe it, in private, as something closer to a job she wasn't sure she'd chosen. There's no dramatic villain in this part of the story, and that's actually what makes it so relatable. Nobody set out to burn Courtney Hadwin out. There was no single bad decision, no smoking gun scandal. What happened was slower and more mundane than that. An industry built for adults applied its normal pressures to someone who hadn't finished growing up yet, and those pressures accumulated. Over the next couple of years, her public presence began to shrink. Social media posts slowed down. Major media appearances became rarer. Fans noticed, and in the absence of any explanation, the usual internet machinery kicked in. Speculation, rumors, people filling the silence with their own theories about what might have happened to her. What was actually happening, by most accounts since, was much less dramatic and much more human. A teenager trying to figure out whether the career she'd been swept into was the one she actually wanted, and needing space away from the noise to work that out. During this period, her connection to Simon Cowell specifically faded in a way that says less about either of them personally and more about how the industry works. He was never really a mentor figure in the traditional sense. He was the executive who spotted her, who greenlit the deal, who did the press rounds when it benefited the show. Once the news cycle moved on to the next season's discoveries, so did the spotlight, and so, largely, did he. That's not necessarily a betrayal. It's just what his job actually is. Talent scouts scout. They don't typically stick around for the after effects of the deals they make. Whether Courtney harbored any resentment about that is something she's never said directly, and it would be irresponsible to put words in her mouth that she hasn't spoken herself. What we do know is that she spent the stretch of years rebuilding on her own terms, mostly out of the spotlight, working with independent producers and slowly regaining a sense of ownership over her own music and her own story. By the mid-2020s, Courtney Hadwin reemerged, not as a viral clip, not as a label's next project, but as an independent artist, working the way she'd apparently wanted to all along, writing her own material, choosing her own collaborators, and putting out music that sounded like it came from her rather than from a boardroom. She began working with respected producers, with genuine roots in soul and blues music, crafting songs that leaned into vulnerability rather than spectacle. In interviews around this era, she's talked candidly about wanting to move beyond the Janis Joplin comparisons that once defined her, pointing out, essentially, that she loves that music, but she isn't trying to be someone from a different decade. She's trying to build her own name. She's also been unusually open, for someone who came up through reality television, about the emotional weight of her early fame, talking about burnout, about the strange experience of having your formative years narrated by strangers on the internet, about learning slowly how to separate her sense of self from the prodigy narrative that got attached to her at 13. She's spoken about therapy and self-reflection in a way that's helped normalize those conversations for a younger audience that grew up watching her. Practically speaking, her career since then has looked like the unglamorous, steady work most real artists actually do, releasing singles independently, building a small but dedicated team around her, playing venue shows across the UK, and slowly assembling a debut album that blends rock, soul, and pop rather than trying to recreate a single viral moment from 2018. She's performed at high-profile events, including an appearance handpicked for a major industry gala, where she paid tribute to the very artists she'd once been compared to, this time on her own terms, as a guest of honor rather than a novelty act. She's also changed management along the way, which is a normal, if rarely discussed, part of most artists' development, moving toward a team that she felt better matched where she wanted her career to go. Now, back to the claim in our title. Over the past couple of years, clips have circulated online, suggesting that Simon Cowell, during some interview, at some point, let his guard down and admitted that the industry pushed Courtney into fame too fast, too young, and that he personally regretted the role he played in that. The quotes attached to these clips are dramatic, an admission that they expected too much from a child, an acknowledgement that they may have failed her. It's a compelling story. It fits the emotional arc perfectly. The tough judge finally showing a crack, the redemption note at the end of a hard journey. It's also, as far as any credible reporting shows, unverified. No major outlet or journalist has published a record of Simon Cowell saying those specific words, in that specific context. It appears to live mostly in retrospective online clips and speculative posts, rather than any confirmed interview. That doesn't mean the underlying idea is wrong. It's entirely plausible that Simon Cowell has reflected, at some point, on what 14-year-old contestants go through after the cameras stop rolling on their viral moment. Most thoughtful people in his position probably have. But plausible isn't the same as confirmed, and it wouldn't be fair to Courtney's real story, or to Simon Cowell as a real person, to present an unverified viral rumor as a documented fact. So we'll say it plainly. If that moment happened the way the clips suggest, there's currently no solid reporting confirming it. Take it as internet speculation, not established history. What is documented is simpler and, honestly, more meaningful. A girl from a small village in County Durham got swept into a machine much bigger than she was ready for, struggled quietly under that weight the way a lot of young performers do, and instead of being consumed by it, found her way back out, slower, wiser, and entirely on her own terms. Today, Courtney Hadwin lives a life that looks a lot more grounded than the one that machine tried to build for her. She's based back in the northeast of England, close to where she grew up, and by most accounts she stayed close with the people she knew before any of this started. She's active and unusually candid on social media, not performing perfection, but sharing studio snippets, casual updates, and honest conversations about mental health that resonate with a young audience navigating their own pressures. She's continued releasing new original music, touring UK venues, and working toward a debut album that reflects genres she actually loves rather than a persona built for her by other people. She's spoken about wanting the process to feel real rather than staged, even if that means it takes longer than a label's deadline would allow. If there's a lesson buried in Courtney Hadwin's story, it's not really about Simon Cowell or about any single villain at all. It's about how unprepared the entertainment industry generally is to handle enormous fame landing on someone who hasn't finished growing up, and how much it matters when that person eventually gets the space and the support to figure out who they actually are once the spotlight moves on. Courtney didn't get the smoothest ride through all of it, but she came out the other side still singing, still writing, and by her own account, finally doing it because she wants to, not because someone told her she had to. What do you think about Courtney Hadwin's journey and where she's headed next? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching.